Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Walkway Over the Hudson, the longest elevated pedestrian walkway in the world. Beautiful day to be out in the open here, and thank you for coming to support us. Welcome if you are a geocacher. Welcome if you're not a geocacher. You'll be one by the time you leave here. Everything's winding down in the walkway, and it's such a beautiful time to come and look at everything. So if this is your first time here, make sure that you look at our beautiful statue over there, that you read about the bridge, and anybody with a red vest on are ambassadors and will be very happy to answer any questions or guide you to some of the walks or anything else that you need. So, Geocaching 101. So if you look at the first slide up here, there's a few things to look at. And I'm going to test you on them. Okay? So there are, can I take this off, Chris? Yeah? So if you look at the slide on the TV screen, first of all it says by Fair Lady NY and Unicorn D2. And that's me and Dan. So I'd like to tell you how I got my name. Anybody remember CB radios from many years ago? Well, I was a CBer in Scotland, and I chose the name Fair Lady. And so when I found out about geocaching and found out you had to have a handle, Fair Lady came to me automatically. And I wasn't a geocacher until I came to this country, so I tried to get the name Fair Lady, and it was already taken. So I had then to think of something else, so I just added the NY for New York. Okay, so that's my story. Dan, tell us where yours came from.
As it turns out, mine also came from CB days. I was an early enough CBer to have the required license to have one. As it became more popular, they dropped the license requirement on the federal level. So I still have my old shortwave numbers and letters from those days. This is going way back. My name is Unicorn D2. The reason, I had a Chevelle wagon, special order, and it had a luggage rack. And it had a 4.5-foot adjustable 12 top-loaded antenna mounted dead center on the top, as in unicorn. So that's where the name came from.
Thank you, Dan. So all these little GIFs that we have on the screen tell you more about geocaching. So I'm going to give you a brief description of what they mean, and then I'm going to test your knowledge as we go further on. So make sure you're listening carefully. So the 4 little squares that you see, that's the geocaching.com official logo. Anytime you see that, that's to do with geocaching, so it's something to look out for. The GIFs around it, the little frog guy, his name is Signal. And Signal appears all over the place to give you information, so he's just a neat little guy that appears. The other icons are all different kinds of caches. Now, I haven't told you what a cache is yet, but I'm going to tell you the different kinds that they have. So, the one with the question mark is called a mystery cache. The one with the ghost is called, Dan, help me out, the ghost one.
Phantom cache.
Phantom cache.
In other words, you don't see anything, but it's actually there.
So don't give them too much. The little yellow one with the 2 boxes is a multi-cache. The one with the earth is an earth cache. The envelope one is called a letterbox cache, and the little green one is a regular cache. So keep all that in mind, and we'll go over them in a bit. Okay? So, what is geocaching? The word geo means earth. The word cache means a place to put treasures and find them. So it makes sense, geocaching, a place on the earth where you find treasures. And that's exactly what geocaching is. The icons up here we'll go over, but let me just give you some information first. So, first geocache, May 2000 in Oregon. someone decided to hide a bucket, give the GPS location, and ask his friends to find it. And they had so much fun that it grew very quickly. It's worldwide, and I know that for a fact because I've actually done a geocache in China, and you'll see a picture of that too. Caches are hidden by regular people all around the world. So anybody can hide a cache. It's not something that you have to be certified or anything like that. If you want to hide a cache, you become part of the geocaching community and you hide the cache. And we're going to show you all the different kinds of caches, containers, and different ways of hiding them that you might find interesting. Caches are usually hidden containers containing a log sheet That's many log sheets together. They can be small, they can be large, and on that log sheet you put your name, your handle. It can be in a book, like Dan has, and some swag. Dan, do you have any swag there? This is where the kids love it.
If you take something, you have to put something in the container. In this case, these are little translucent dies. Gamers use them when they play various other games that are out there now. Unfortunately, I began placing these $1 a piece, and I realized, wait a minute, I just spent $300 on things, so I've changed what I use.
So inside a cache, actually this is a cache container. This was given to me by my school students when I retired in 2016, and as you can see, it's rather large. So we haven't hidden it yet, but we have to find a really good spot to hide it, as you can see the size of it. But inside any cache, you're going to find the logbook, where you can write your name, probably a little piece of paper that gives you some information about the cache, and then some of the swag that Dan said. So you might find some little rubber balls, you might find things for kids, little animals, and that's why kids love it, because they can open the cache, and the rule is that if you take something, you have to put something in. So it also gives them a sense of community, that they're sharing things. Also in the cache, there might be something like this called a travel bug. And the idea of travel bugs is that the travel bugs travel, and you log it, and it can go all around the world and come back to you if you're lucky. So there's many of those around too. There's actually over 2 million caches in the world today. That kind of blows my mind. Dan and I have found over 2,000 each. We have a friend that was going to come today but couldn't make it. Her handle is Burger428, and she has 14,000 caches found. So she does a lot more than we do.
The record right now is about 85,000 held by one person.
Wow. I think, as Dan said, caches are found using latitude and longitude, so GPS is awesome to use. We both started with something like this, which is a GPS unit. Mine has been in the garage for several years, so I took it out last night, took the back off it, and I've left batteries in it, and it's all corroded inside, so I don't even know if it works. I haven't used it in many years, but it was great when I started out, except you had to download all the caches on here and then open it up, and if the signal wasn't good, you had problems. Dan and I both use our phones now with the geocaching app, and that is so much better because you can be anywhere and you can just open the app and see if there's any caches around, and therefore you can do all these caches. So that makes a huge difference to have the phone. So you can use a GPS unit or a smartphone, and all you do is download the app, come up with a name, and you're all set. That makes you a geocacher just by having a name. And you have to sign into geocaching.com. So remember that if you want to take part and you're interested in carrying that out. So what we have up here around it, the bumper sticker, that's a travel bug. And it's really neat when somebody leaves you a note on your car because they've seen a travel bug on your car and they're a fellow geocacher. Or they log in and they've, logged your travel bug. You buy them for the back of the car. If you look out, you see a little cross trek out in the road on the way out today. On the back of it, there's a travel bug about this big. And you can log that on and get that find. The coins over here on the right-hand side in the corner, they're souvenir coins. And you get all sorts of souvenir coins. I have one here that's rather a fancy one. And that's commemorating my 2,000 finds. So you can have a nice coin collection too if you wish to. Dan, is that a picture of you with that cache up there? I'm not sure either. But it's a great container. Great container. Okay, so that's a picture of my page on the web, on the geocaching web. And all those little smiley faces and green and blues are all caches. All the yellow ones are ones that I found. All the colours are ones that I have not yet found. And that's just, you can see how far away that is, not too far from the bridge. Dan's probably found the same yellows that I have, because Dan and I have been caching together for a very long time. That's just zooming in, and I wanted to show you we actually do have caches on the bridge. Now, we've been telling you about boxes and, things like this and this, all caches. But because the bridge is a very special place, having something hidden would not be a good idea. So on the bridge we have virtual caches. So virtual caches, I think Dan already said, you look for something that's not there. So you might have to come up with a number on a sign, you might have to solve a puzzle, but you do something and then you can claim the cache. So the three out on the bridge are not physical caches, they're virtual caches. The one that we're going to go find today, and I don't have a pointer, if you can see the little green circle with the box where we are, it's very close to where we are. That's the cache that we're actually going to go find today.
So you're using the walkway?
It's not on the walkway. We're going to do the one that's green. It's actually in the woods. Okay, so we're going to go walk and Dan's going to take us. He's already found it, so he's going to take us and show us where it is. And this gives you a picture of both Dan and myself. I started caching in 2009, came back from Scotland, very excited about finding a first cache, told Dan about it, and Dan was very excited, and Dan and I both started caching. Fortunately for us, or unfortunately, our spouses didn't really like to cache. So Dan and I ended up spending a lot of time together caching. And eventually that changed, and we did go out as a foursome many times too. So, Dan, tell us some about your stats here. So go through your profile. I don't know if you want to stand further back or whether you can see it from there.
It's been sort of a start and stop. There was a period in time where I had to have a right shoulder replaced. We found a photograph the other day of me sitting there with my arm in a cast, having just done a cache, so I didn't totally give up. 2119, it's actually a little higher than that now, it's not much. Virtual caches, we've already described. You can get an idea. Everybody will have a set of stats they develop. This is done automatically on the computer, which is an amazing system they've put in place. If you do something in some remote part of China, it will show up at the home office within probably 45 minutes, and anyone else in the world can read it in about an hour. I wish other systems worked as efficiently. They operate regularly in 21 to 22 languages. In some areas, they operate in 25 languages. So it's an amazing operating system they use to keep track of not only your caches, but anyone else's in the area or in the country. So that's just the way the system is operating. Mystery caches, I've done a few at 18. Now there's some that are not on there. I have been very reluctant for what reasons, I'm still not sure yet. We did, four of us did a cache together called, it's a GeoArt, we'll talk a little about it later. It's 123 caches. We did them in 2 days using a car and 4 people and a lot of plugins to the battery system on the car to make it work. But it was a lot of fun. We even had a little tailgate lunch out the back one day to keep us going. But we'll talk about that in a minute, and I'll show you the maps for that one. As you see from the others, some are done in other countries. One that I did was fascinating. We were up to F1 races in Montreal. We were staying near the airport. There's a hotel, and that's a place where you can put a tag in. And there's one across from FDR Homestead, by the way, a hotel. And you can put, it's a large container, and you can put your travel bug in there, and somebody will pick up and move it around for you. So in this case, I left it there, and it bounced around Montreal for a while, and then it disappeared. And about 3 weeks later, it showed up on a beach in Cuba. Now, at the time, US, you couldn't fly to Cuba, but obviously somebody in Canada could, and they did just that. And it sat there for a while, and then unfortunately finally disappeared. But so it gives you an idea. That's why I like travel bugs, because you never know where they're going to go. And they're just a lot of fun. And quite often some of them have been operating for 4, 5, 7 years, and they end up in the strangest places. That's all I'll do with the stat.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, the only difference, Dan and I have done a lot of traditional caches, multis, virtual. We've done probably a little bit of everything. I've also hidden 4 caches, which is a lot of fun, because you have to find a really good place, you have to decide what kind of cache it's going to be, what we're going to put in it. Is it going to be a kid's cache with lots of stuff in it? So that's really interesting too. As you can see, we're both friends on geocaching, so when you're friends with another caching person, you can go in and look at their stats. So it's kind of like a competition almost. My brother got me started in Scotland, and he started in 2008, I started 2009, Dan started 2010. We're all about the same amount of geocaches, and it's kind of funny because we're always saying, how many do you have now? You know, we're like kids in school, because if I've got 2 more than my brother, then I feel as if I've really accomplished something, you know. So that part is really kind of funny. But let's move on. Okay, this is one of the virtual ones in the middle of the bridge. Okay, and it's called BLH, Walkway Over the Hudson. And it's got some interesting information. I'm not going to read it all, but what I wanted to point out to you, when you're looking for a cache, this is how you know where to find it, what it looks like, what size it is, and who's found it. So if you look at this, I wish we had a bigger TV screen actually. The stars at the top, difficulty and terrain. So this is a 2-star difficulty. That means solving it is a 2. It goes right up to a 5. So 1 through 5, 1 being the easiest, 5 being the hardest. Terrain is 1.5. I guess that's a fair. It's in the middle of the bridge, so the terrain is okay. It's got 21 favourites, and I found it, I can't read the date from up there, 2017. And this was a mystery cache. And I did this with my kids at Poughkeepsie Day School. We had a geocaching group who went out once a week and we went geocaching. So we solved this in school and then came to find it. And a mystery cache is not usually where it starts. So we knew it was posted on the bridge, but that's not where we were going to find it. So we had to work the puzzle out, and here's the puzzle. From the north coordinates, subtract the amount of letters in the name of the river that this bridge crosses. From the west coords, add the product of 38 times the number of letters in the exact name of this state park. 4 words. So north is a subtraction and west is an addition, starting from the posted coordinates. Now, that was great to post to a bunch of middle school kids. And that took them quite a while. So all the answers, we got a variety of different answers, and it was up to them to go to the tracker. There's a tracker as part of geocaching where you put in what you think the answer is, and it tells you if you're right or not. So we did that, and we did get some correct answers, and then we all headed out to find the cache. Now, this is where we log the cache. So you log it, and it automatically comes up on the same page. I just couldn't get all this on one page, but it would look on one page on the Walkway site. So it tells you that Fair Lady, New York, found it. The snow really put a damper on my student geocaching activity today. We decided to try some puzzle caches, and this was a fun one. The puzzle solved quickly, and we made our way to the final destination. 22 kids circled the area, and we all spied the container as we rotated around. So, as I said, it's not on the bridge. It's not where that picture is, because I don't like posting pictures of where the cache is, because that spoils it for other people. So it was below the bridge somewhere, and we all circled this object to make it easier for us. I'm not going to tell you what it was, but you can guess what it was. And we circled it and we took hands, and this was one of the students decided that this would be the best way to do it. And then we all took 2 steps to the left. And we all looked at the spot, and then we took 2 more steps. And we looked at the spot, and finally somebody said, "There it is!" And we found the cache. So that's my 22 students, and we had some great times with geocaching. So that's one of the bridge caches that you saw on that other slide. This is the other one that's a virtual cache, and you can see there's myself and my husband and Dan and Anita. And this was a virtual cache where you just had to go out and take a picture with the sign. So that was an easy one, okay? And if you look over here, it will tell you again, it's a 1.5 star difficulty and a 1 terrain. And it got 107 favourite points. There's usually a hint. There's no hint in this. Down at the bottom it says additional hint, but there wasn't a hint there. So easy to, an easy one to find. Didn't have to do a lot of work for that one. Sometimes you have to do a lot of work. Dan and I have gotten into some predicaments trying to get caches. And we could probably write a book, Dan. Yeah. Oh, this is the one that we were talking about. This is the Phantom. So this is 124 caches in Massachusetts, and a lot of local cachers had completed it, and we thought this would be the best thing to do. So the 4 of us took off for a weekend, and we went to Massachusetts, and we did all 124 caches in 2 days. In order to do that, do you see that nice phantom face? That appears when you log all the caches. It doesn't look like that, okay? So this is what Dan and I did.
This is what it looks like on the computer. Lots of question marks. Okay? But once you work out the calculations, that's what it looks like.
So that's where we had to
all
go.
All kinds of roads, locations.
And we plotted it because you couldn't just start anywhere because you wouldn't get them all. So we had to divide it into segments and decide the best way to do it. And we did 124 caches in 2 days. So it was amazing.
2 states crossing the border.
Yeah. So that's called GeoArt, and they're getting really popular. So that's something. Dan just heard of another one today. Dan, what was it called?
Snoopy, up in New Hampshire.
So maybe we need to make a trip to New Hampshire. So this is my faraway China cache. And this is Tiananmen Square in China. And I went there several years ago with some high school kids from Poughkeepsie Day School. And I took my faithful GPS with me, because I didn't have a cell phone then, and the guide that we had, because when you go to China, they don't let you wander by yourself, so we had a local guide for Tiananmen Square, and then we had a guide that travelled with us to all the different provinces. So I brought out my GPS and I said, I want to do something, and they both looked at this and they said, please put that away or we'll be arrested. I said, but it's a GPS. And he says, no, we're not allowed to do anything like this. So I said, okay. I says, I'm going to take my kids, I'll be back in 5 minutes. And I said to the kids, come on, we're going to go do something, and we followed it. And you had to stand on a certain stone and take a picture. Again, it was a virtual cache, because can you imagine trying to find a cache in Tiananmen Square without being arrested? So that's the Tiananmen Square cache. And that's my furthest away cache. There we go. So this is just some fun pictures that I put together, and I'll tell you about a few, and then Dan can tell you about a few, okay? So the very first one, and I don't know how well you can see it, because it's a slideshow, I can't use my computer to zoom in, so I can't get in any closer, but the very first picture up here is my brother with a pair of waders on, and he's going into a cave. So we decided we were going to do this, and he said, you're the smallest, you go. And I said, no, you're the youngest, you go. So we were arguing over it, and finally he said, right, I'm doing it. So he put the waders on, and it wasn't the waders that scared me. I don't like getting into dark caves. You don't know what's in there. And he thought he could just put his hand under and feel it. Well, no, he had to go way in, and then it was stuck on the top of the cave. It was a magnetic box, and it was on some metal in the cave. So we did find it, and it was all fine. The ones with the kids are the one way to the right, and the one way to the left, and the one above it are all my grandkids. And it's a great way of taking your grandkids out and finding new adventures, and finding new places, and having lots of fun. And there's some of Dan and I. The one where we're wearing mustaches and beards, that was Mill's Mansion, Dan? Is that the one where we did yes? There's a whole series that I'll talk about in a minute of caches that come out every spring and every autumn. And they're really kind of amazing. They're always fun caches. And that was in the cache. It was to play a part in a kind of play-like thing. So Dan and I are game for anything, so we had to put the mustache on. And of course, Anita was also there, but she's the one that took the picture. She didn't put anything on. So I'll say no more about that. Dan, I'll pass it to you. Oh, my favourite one, the one down at the bottom, looked to me like a bee's nest, and there was a tape measure in it. And when I pulled the tape measure down, the cache was in the bottom of the tape measure. So that was awesome to see this bee's nest that really wasn't a bee's nest. Dan, pick a couple and tell them about a couple of yours.
The middle row on the right, we're standing in front of a fire hydrant. One of the nice things that's happened with geocaching is that some of the fire companies are realizing the kids enjoy this activity. So what they've done is there are several fire companies, particularly on the other side of the river, where they have placed a cache within probably 100 yards, 50 yards of the building, and set up a cache site there. Everything in the container relates to firefighting, little guys, fire engines, things like that. If the child finds it, the child is then invited into the firehouse to look at the engines and get a talk. There are at least 3 or 4 in the other, I know, probably over here as well on this side, but certainly on the Dutchess County side, there are fire companies that do this as an activity. And someone's always in the firehouse, so that's not an issue. Somewhere on the top row, the little boy in the yellow, that was done up at Rockport. If anybody knows the area, there's a lot of granite up there, and that's one of the local granite rocks, and it was placed underneath the rock. So that was one of his early caches, but not his first. So I'll just use those two. to show, bottom row, second in from the right. I think most people recognize what that is, an LL Bean boot. And needless to say, again, we didn't photograph at the actual location, but it's very nearby. So even famous places are known to have caches hidden somewhere nearby. And I think that brings up a really interesting point. Some of you remember the game that was active a few years ago, where people were running all over with their phones and running through people's yards and everything else, and got everybody upset. One of the key factors to geocaching this program is to place a cache, you have to have permission of the landowner and explain what you're doing. And in some cases, that's not a problem. Occasionally, it is, and I think we'll go into more detail when it comes to public parks and things of that nature. There's certain guidelines that are very strict. We are in a unique place because in several instances, this was a location, when I mean this area, in general, Mid-Hudson Valley, where certain experiments were done, they proved successful, and that's allowed geocaches in state parks. Nobody else had them at the time. So be lucky and be thankful. And we'll go into more detail about that history. You've seen these, and so we'll go on.
Thank you, Darren.
These are just some cache containers. The four bottom ones they used to be in Vassar College, and they were called the Doctor Who series. And they were placed by a wonderful friend of ours called MST Zillow. He's now moved down south, unfortunately, because we really miss him for his creativity. He made all those containers, and they're all characters from Doctor Who. So it's amazing sometimes when you open, you find the cache and you realise the time that it's gone into it to do that. So just to show you the different kinds of containers that you can have. The police officer is one that I found in Scotland, and the hand is one that we found a while ago that was really kind of scary. Sometimes you don't want to put your hand in there and know what's inside out because you really don't know what it is. So lots of different containers, and we have a lot here to show if you want to come up later and look at them. So this is what Dan was talking about. This is called Taconic Region Challenge Caches. And this is the May through November 11th one. And on the right, you can see it's like a check-off list. And it's all the state parks that have geocaches. And if you find 45 of them, you can claim a special medal, a special coin. So there's a lot of people who do that. And as Dan said, we're very lucky because there's other places that do not allow caches in their parks. New York State Parks have been wonderful and encouraging geocachers to place the caches. Now, when you go to look at the caches around our area, they're placed by a lady, her name is Liz, and she's the one that's got 14,000 caches. And you have to check the state parks. You have to make sure that they're in a safe place. There's certain places that parks staff do not want you to go. If they're growing some new trees or some new plants, they may not want you in that specific place. So you have to be very careful about, the placement of them. But we're very lucky to have them. These come out twice a year, Geocache Challenge. And it's encouraging people to go to state parks, it's encouraging people to go out looking in the trails and walking, and getting some exercise too. So it's something that a lot of people look forward to twice a year just to continue their caching. That's four of the parks, Statsburg, James Baird, Claremont and Olana, and that's the caches that are there. So if anybody wants to do them, it's an easy thing. You just look them up on the computer and you go and take your water and your hiking boots and your sticks and have a great time searching for them, which is really good. This is the cache that anyone who wants to is going to go find. Okay? It's called Wren House for Sale. And looking at that, I know immediately that that's a birder cache, because birder is a bird lady. and she does a lot of caches with birds. And she does amazing caches. This is one that was bought, but she does amazing containers with different birds. But you can buy cache containers that look like anything. You know, spiders, birds, you name it.
No snakes?
Oh, yes, there are
Yeah.
snakes. I just don't have one.
I know the snakes up there. I saw them over there.
Yes, so you can buy a cache that's a snake too. Yeah, there's many sites that sell them.
This looks like a rock on the ground.
Yeah.
The person has hollowed it out. It's a container underneath it. It sits in the ground, and you know there are a lot of rocks around here. So try to find this one.
Yeah, and that's a bigger one. If you find the right place to put it, people are going to hate you for a while because they can't find it. And then underneath there's a space to put your log sheet and anything else you want to put. So this cache that Dan is going to take us to find, okay, it is a 2-star difficulty, and it's a 1.5 terrain, and there is an addition, there's a hint, and it says, up the hill to a small tree near a larger one. So I know it's up the hill over there, and it's going to be a small tree near a large one. Let's see what else we can tell you about it. It says size up there, but there's no size. It says other. So this is interesting. It's probably going to be, it says here, you're looking for an L and L, a lock and lock, you know, which is just one of the boxes that locks together, like this, like what Dan has. And this is Berger's profile on the right that I stuck up there. It's hard to read, but you can see the amount of caches that she has hidden and that she owns. It's dramatic. So I think she spends all her spare time caching. Yes. Okay. And just one last thing. This is a group on Facebook that we belong to, and anybody who lives around here and who's a cacher belongs to, and it's called Mid-Hudson Valley Geocachers. Again, there's a link to it on here, but I can't click on it because it's a slideshow. This is a picture taken before COVID, and that's a bunch of us who used to get together once a year, and we would have a geocaching get-together. And it was a potluck with dinner and lots of games and swapping items that have to do with geocaching. So, anything else, Dan? You want to add anything?
Before going, I wanted to mention a couple other containers we talked about. You'll see them mentioned if you start doing this. These little guys you may find in your drugstore. People put pills in them and they're fairly watertight. These are called bison tubes. And they will hang on. Sometimes they'll leave very bright colors. Sometimes they'll wrap them in camouflage tape, which means you don't see them at all. You have to find them. Another classic container, your pill bottle. Pill bottles are very popular. Make sure they are tight because they don't always seal tight. These are outside continually, and so you have to be careful. What you often will do is pick these up at your local hardware store, earth magnet. And you've created your own container. You can attach it to something metal. You can hide it that way. Or dangle it in a tree and wrap the tape around it. Again, you can't see it. Most people have no idea what these are. This is where your 2-liter soda bottle starts life. It gets put into a container, heated up, and then they expand it with gas. And you now have a thin wall 2-liter container. These are virtually waterproof. They're very strong. They're not cheap, but they do the job in terms of being watertight and pretty indestructible. So there are lots of ways of doing containers. People will make their own. I mentioned parts they put together. They can do it inexpensively. They can do it expensively. That's another one. Looks like a cover on a utility box. It's got magnets in the back and then a small pocket. That's not metal. That you can stick.
You want metal, you can find it. Yeah, there we go. If this was a metal pole and you were looking for a geocacher, something with a screw that is screw on and listens. So sometimes it's a mosquito and a screw as well.
If you're a camper, you know you have to have dry matches and so forth. So outdoor company will sell small match containers or small cigarette lighter containers that stay dry. Here's another one. This is from the older days. They were often used by the military. Also seal tight containers.
Dan, I'm going to go get the big one.
Okay,
Keep
get the
talking
big one.
for a minute.
I think that's sort of it. One of the early definitions for what we do was that you're in the woods using billion-dollar equipment in the sky to find Tupperware boxes. And for many people, that's where it was. These were very popular, the early Tupperware containers, or lock and lock they call them, because you have to lock the sides and the ends. And still very popular as a dry container to store. It's amazing how water gets into some of this stuff, because you figure it's perfect, and then go back a couple months later and it's not. The paper that was used is called dry paper. It's like a telex they put on housing. It can get soaking wet and dry. There are a number of times where in the winter I open a container and everything is frozen. So it's back to the car, turn the heater on full blast, put it up on top, and let it dry out before I can write on it. And that brings up another choice. What do you use to sign your container? The best bet, no questions, is a slimline Sharpie. Unless you have a stamp that uses the waterproof ink. Slimline Sharpies outdo pencils, outdo ballpoint pens, which tend to run after a while. So, in your own
Buy
box.
stamps with your name and
Yeah.
you can use that instead.
One other area I want to mention. Really isn't about geocaching, but it's about being in the woods. You're concerned about poison ivy, you're concerned about the other things you find when you're traveling through the woods. I usually have a container of this during the summer. Occasionally I will take it out in the wintertime. A light spray. I can wear clothes that run all the way down to my hands. I always have a couple pair of rubber gloves because sometimes you have to reach into areas you don't want to put your hands otherwise. During the summer you may run into hornets. If it's in the end of a cover out section of a road guard, safety guard on the road, where people like to hide caches in the little coves inside those safety rails. Always carry a small tweezer, because some of these containers, as you will see, are about that large, and to get the paper out, you need tweezers to pull it out. Always have a pair of tweezers. So there's certain pieces that are not about finding the cache, but more about being able to sign the cache in the first place. So, because you work that hard to find it, you really would like to get credit for it. Those are always carry a couple Band-Aids. You never know. You trip or fall or scratch yourself, you want to protect. And I grew up in a family my father was a doctor. So in this case, I'm used to working with people who stop by his office and he's not there on emergency before sending him off to the hospital. So I have my own emergency kit. One of the things I do, I don't have my own caches, but I do repair caches when I see them. So I have O-rings for these. A lot of them break their O-rings after about 2 or 3 years. I also carry extra strips of paper, that write on wet paper I mentioned. So just little things in the kit, just fix the kit up, knowing that I leave it better than I got it. So people don't necessarily want to do that, but that's something I do since I don't have my own caches to take care of. So I pass that along.
Thank you, Dan. So this is a cache container, an ammo box, and Dan made this for me long time ago when I had reached 1,000 caches. It was hidden but sometimes you have to move caches. Sometimes things change and you have to move them. So this had to be moved. And it's got a whole bunch of swag inside. It's got a logbook. It's got lots of great things inside it. So one of the things that we have to do now is rehide it somewhere, which is awesome. Yeah, if you bury it in the ground, it's going to get really rusty quickly.
Yeah.
So you want to find some stones, some sort of something, a cave, something that you can sit it in before you, and then cover it with things.
Remember where you put it. Sometimes you might forget.
That's why you get your GPS. Yeah. So, as we said, we've been caching a long, long time. So I just want to tell you one funny story. Dan and I have done many different kinds of caches together. So I want to tell you about one of the times that we went, and there was a cache in a memorial with a fence around it. And we had to get to the other side of the fence to get it. And I spied a bush that was kind of loose that we could get through. And so we went in and we got the cache. I always follow Dan because, as you know, he's taller than me, so he can push past all the bush and the pricklers, and I go behind him and I don't get hurt. So we got the cache, and then we got a phone call from Anita, who's sitting in the car, and Anita says, the security people are driving round and they're heading towards you, and I don't know if it's legal for you guys to be in there. So we said, okay, we got the cache, we're leaving now. So Dan rushes off on the road to go out the same way. Now these bushes, it was a hedge. They were taller than me. So Dan goes through the hedge and I'm following him, and I've got my hands up because you don't want to get caught with your hands down because you can't do anything. So I have my hands up like this and I'm walking through, and all of a sudden the bushes come in on me and I'm stuck like this. Dan, in the meanwhile, is taking his long strides to get away, and I'm shouting. I can't shout because the cop car's coming, and I'm shouting, Dan, Dan, Dan. Finally, now Anita and my husband are laughing because they're watching all of this, and I'm stuck in there with my hands up in the air, and finally Dan sees me, and he does very, gentlemanly, comes back and opens up all the... I couldn't move. I mean, I was absolutely stuck. I could move my legs, I couldn't move my hands, so I couldn't get through. But we finally got out. So that's one story, but I have to say we've had many stories where things have happened, so it's always great fun. And how many people here have cached before? Anybody? Oh, excellent. Super. How many people think they might like to cache? Yay. Okay, so Dan, you want to take everybody and we'll go over and find the cache?
Okay.
Yes? So, I don't think you're going to go through bushes or anything. It's quite an easy walk. Okay. So if you want to follow Dan, he's going to take us up the hill over there, and we will see if we can find the cache.